Delighted to have Jerry Kaplan with us tonight. His book, Humans Need Not Apply, sitting on the table out there. If you don't have a copy, do get one afterwards. I mean, this is how I would describe it. A candid call to arms is a phrase that Jerry's used for bold ideas to ease the transition through the next industrial revolution. I don't know if that's a fair way of putting it. Jerry is widely known as an entrepreneur, an innovator, an author, and a futurist. He founded a number of Silicon Valley startups. So this is his second, if not his third career. Jerry Kaplan.
There's some common wisdom about artificial intelligence that I'd like to debunk, in my view. And that is that what we're doing in artificial intelligence is we're building increasingly intelligent machines. And that these are becoming more and more intelligent, and sometime soon they might surpass human capabilities. And when they do that, they're going to start to steal our jobs and possibly even escape human control. And then they're going to take over the world. Now, I'm going to present the case today that that narrative is basically very misguided and, in fact, counterproductive for solving the kinds of social problems that the field is actually going to create. A much better and appropriate framing, which is really supported more by actual historical and current events that are going on, is that AI is really simply a natural expansion of the long-standing efforts to automate tasks that dates back at least to the Industrial Revolution. And then I want to talk, after I explain this reframing, about the consequences of that and how that rethinking of the field leads us to different kinds of conclusions about what we need to do. So what is artificial intelligence really? I have some bad news for you. I've done a lifetime of work in this field. I started over probably 35 years ago. I'm a really old guy. And I've done a great deal of reflection on this question of what is artificial intelligence and the question of whether machines can think. And my reluctant and disappointing answer is very simple: no. At least they can't, or they don't think the way that people think. And so far, at least, there's really no roadmap from the stuff that we're doing today to with the stuff you see in the movies. So machines are not people, and there's simply no persuasive argument that we're on that path to providing generally intelligent, sentient beings, you know, despite all the stuff that is fun to watch on TV. But wait a minute, you might say. Can't they solve all kinds of complex reasoning and perception problems? Well, the answer is sure. They can perform tasks that humans solve using intelligence. But that doesn't mean that the machines themselves are intelligent. It merely means that many tasks that we thought required general intelligence are in fact subject to solution by other more mechanical means. There's an old joke in AI, I'd be curious if you guys have heard it, that once you've solved a problem in AI, it's no longer an AI problem. Well, I don't think that's a joke. So I'm going to look at some of the signature accomplishments of artificial intelligence, and from this different perspective, and review that concept. Okay, let's start with computer chess. Now, for decades, the coming-of-age test for artificial intelligence was considered whether you would ever be able to build a computer that could beat the world's chess champion. And so chess was considered the quintessential demonstration of human intelligence. Well, you might know this actually happened in 1997. And lots of ink in the media was spilled at places like Thomson Reuters that lamented the arrival of super intelligent machines. And there was all kinds of hand-wringing over what this meant for the future of mankind. But the truth is, it meant nothing. Other than that, you could do a lot of clever programming and use the increasing speed of computers to play chess. So then people said, okay, not chess. How about driving a car? Surely, they'll never be able to drive a car. That requires all kinds of real-world knowledge and skills. Well, as you guys probably know, in 2004, at the DARPA challenge, at least in the US, this bulwark of human supremacy of driving a car was breached. And it's coming, we're leading to autonomous vehicles. How many of you have taken a drive in a self-driving car? Nobody? One, okay. I mean, in where we live, you can actually go to a car dealership now and try them out. So they're on their way. By the way, they don't work very well, but that's a different story. But the thing is that these autonomous vehicles, they drive cars. They don't do other things. They don't build houses. They don't cook meals. They don't make beds. Okay, so then people said, all right, computers can play chess and they can drive cars, but they could never play Jeopardy. I'm hoping you guys know what Jeopardy is. Yesterday, oh my God. Television game, Ken Jennings, okay. It looks like that. It's a TV show. It involves a lot of wordplay and reasoning, and you've got to ring in very quickly. Ever heard of IBM's Watson? The reason Watson's famous is it beat the world champion at Jeopardy. Just telling you that. But what is Watson? It's really a very sophisticated knowledge-based retrieval system, and it's an inference system that was honed, at least at that time, to the particular problem of answering Jeopardy questions. And you might be interested to know its main advantage over the human contestants was that it could ring in before they could, because it was operating at electronic speeds. So whenever it calculated it had a high probability correct answer, in a fraction of a millisecond, and this poor guys, Ken Jennings and Brad Ritter, who were the world champions, pushing the button. Well, what kind of race is that? What we demonstrated is mostly that a computer can push a button faster than a human. Let's look at machine learning systems. Aren't they more like human intelligence? Well, the answer is not really. Consider how machines and people learn. Now, you can teach a computer to recognize a cat by showing it 1,000,000 images. Or you can simply point one out to a 3-year-old. That's a cat. And it gets the same job done. Obviously, humans and machines do not learn in the sense of these programs the same way. Let's take a practical problem on which there's been tremendous progress recently, which is machine versus human translation. Tremendous strides have been made in the field in the past few years, mainly, though, by applying statistical and machine learning techniques to large bodies of concorded text. Look at it this way. How do people perform that difficult task? They learn 2 or more languages along with all the respective cultural aspects of it and the conventions of the language. And then they read a text in one language, and they understand what it says, and they render that meaning as closely as possible in the other language. So machine translation, as successful as it is, bears almost no relationship to the human translation process. Its success of this technology simply means that there's another way to approximate the same results mechanically. So my point is simple. Lots of problems that we think require intelligence to solve actually don't. There are other ways to solve them, and that's what we're using machines to do. Calculating used to be the province of highly trained specialists. Believe it or not, a calculator in 1940 used to be a profession. Oh, I'm a calculator. You would take your problem to the calculator, and they would work it out. It required considerable intelligence and attention to detail and skill to be able to do calculations. Does it mean that the machine is intelligent? Of course not. And the same thing's true for giving driving directions, picking and packing orders in warehouses, designing more efficient wings for airplanes. Now, these are all certainly important technological advances, but we don't have to worry about the robots taking over, because the robots, they don't have any feelings or emotions, and they don't have any independent goals, except in the movies. Robots really don't have any independent goals and desires. A robot that's designed to wash and fold laundry, it might be plenty sophisticated. It might learn not to put laundry away when you're asleep, or exactly how you like your shirts folded, and it's going to be really quite remarkable. But it's not going to wake up one day and say, oh my God, what a fool I've been. I really want to play the great concert halls of Austria. That's not what we're doing. Now, I want to talk about the consequences of taking this more mundane view of what artificial intelligence is. It's certainly true that artificial intelligence is going to have a serious impact on labor markets and on employment, but perhaps not exactly in the way that you expect. If you think of machines in the superintelligence framing, as becoming ever more intelligent and threatening our livelihoods, the obvious solution is to prevent them from getting smarter and to lock our doors and arm ourselves with tasers so we can shock them when they come to take our jobs. Let me just review some potential future headlines. In the New York Times, robots steal jobs at record pace. But the Wall Street Journal or Thomson Reuters might have said, profits rise as worker productivity soars. My point being, those are really the same thing. The robots are definitely coming, but they're not exactly coming for our jobs. Machines and computers don't actually perform jobs. They automate tasks. Now, except in extreme cases, you don't roll in a robot and show the person to the door and kick them to the curb. Instead, what happens is the new technology hollows out and changes the jobs that people perform. Even experts, lawyers and doctors and accountants and all that, spend most of their time doing mundane tasks. These are repetitive tasks, like they review lab test results, or lawyers draft simple contracts. They write straightforward press releases in the press. They fill out paperwork and forms. Now, that's on the intellectual side. On the blue-collar side, lots of workers do simple tasks like laying bricks and painting houses and mowing lawns and driving cars and loading trucks and packing boxes, taking blood samples, fighting fires, delivering mail and directing traffic. And many of these intellectual and physical tasks require straightforward logic or simple hand-eye coordination of some kind. And there are a bunch of new technologies, many of which you're probably working on right here, that are mainly driven by artificial intelligence techniques that are poised to automate a lot of these routine tasks. So if your job involves some kind of narrow, well-defined set of rules, and many jobs do, then indeed your employment is at risk. But if you have a broader set of responsibilities, or if your job requires a human touch, such as expressing sympathy or providing companionship, I don't think you really have very much to worry about. Now I pulled these off of, I think, the Bureau of Labor Statistics job description site in the US. Look what bricklayers do. They lay bricks. Pretty simple. This is a licensed practical nurse duties. That's somebody who assists a nurse in the US. Ensuring patients and their families understand release instructions. We're not going to be automating that with a computer. Saying, do you understand the release instruction? It just doesn't work that way. And they actually list providing emotional support. You're not going to have robotic undertakers that you're going to go to that's going to say, I am so sorry for your loss. I mean, it's just meaningless. You have to have some kind of human connection to those people. So whose job do you think is at risk here? Obviously, the bricklayer. But most jobs actually involve a mix of general capabilities and specific skills. So as machines perform more and more of the routine activities, the plain fact is that you need fewer people to get the job done. So what is one person's productivity enhancing tool is another one's, we call them in the US pink slips. You use that term here? Basically, you're fired. Or more likely what it is you just don't hire as quickly, or there's another job opening that isn't open. Automation, whether it's driven by artificial intelligence or not, changes the skills that are necessary to perform that work. And the resulting loss of jobs is what the economists call structural unemployment. And that's the mismatch of the skills to the needs of the marketplace. The more pressing problem posed by AI workers is not so much a lack of jobs, it's the training that's required to perform those jobs. Historically, as automation has eliminated the need for workers, the resulting increase in wealth has eventually generated new kinds of jobs to pick up the slack. And I see no reason why that pattern is not going to continue. It absolutely will. But the key word there was eventually. 200 years ago, you might be surprised to learn that 90% of the US population worked in agriculture. Basically, what it meant to work was to grow stuff and work in the fields. Now today, less than 2% of the US population is actually involved in agriculture, and they were able to feed everybody. So, oh my God, is everybody out of work? Of course not. We've had plenty of time to adapt over that 200 years. So, if it happens quickly, that's when we have a problem, and that's what we're seeing an acceleration in. So what are the jobs of the future? You've probably seen, maybe you've seen this article out of Oxford saying 47% of jobs are going to be eliminated. Well, that's true, sort of, but there are going to be new kinds of work. So what are the jobs of the future? And they're really jobs that inherently involve personal touch. These are demonstrations of skill or person-to-person interactions. You know, we're not going to be going and watching robots race cars. It's just not interesting. So and I really don't see why we can't be a society of competitive gamers and artisans, personal shoppers, and flower arrangers, and tennis pros, and party planners, and no doubt a lot of other things that don't exist yet. You might say, well, who's going to do the real work? The guy 200 years ago in agriculture wouldn't think we're working at all. They would think we were crazy, the stuff that we're doing. Like, you're not working. Look what you're doing. That's the people of the future will think what we're doing is silly. You can buy a machine to go do it. That's the good news. But the bad news is it takes time for these transitions to happen. And a new wave of artificial intelligence-enabled applications is likely to accelerate the normal cycle of job destruction and job creation. So we need to find new ways to retrain displaced workers. That's the challenge that we have. I'm telling you the problems now. After I'm done scaring you, I will give you more comfort that there will be things for you to do when you get out of school. There's another dark cloud that relates to advances in artificial intelligence. And while it's true that automation actually makes society richer, there are very serious questions about whose pockets are filled by that increased wealth. Up until about 1970, on and off, we have found ways to distribute the economic benefits of increased productivity pretty broadly across society. And this supported the rise of what's called the mythical middle class. But it doesn't take much to see that those days are over. A small group of people are getting very wealthy, and the average has gone up, but the median has stayed down. You guys are engineers. If you don't understand what that distinction means, you shouldn't be here today. I'm here to deliver a very interesting piece of news, which that Karl Marx was right. As economists know, automation is the substitution of capital for labor. The struggle between capital and labor is a losing proposition for workers. What that means is that the benefits of the new automation naturally accrue to those who can invest in the new systems. And why not? People really aren't working harder than they used to. In fact, working hours have decreased slowly but consistently over the last 100 years. We're not actually any smarter than we were 100 years ago. The reason we can now do more with less is that business owners have invested some of their capital into process and productivity improvements, and naturally, they reap the rewards. So what has all this got to do with artificial intelligence? The technologies on the drawing boards are quickening the hearts of entrepreneurs and investors everywhere, hopefully, as you're well aware. And they're the ones who stand to benefit. While what they do is they export more and more of the risks to the rest of society. Some people have the mistaken impression that the free market is going to address these problems, if only we can get the government out of the way. There's an entire wing of the US, called Republicans, that believe this nonsense. Sorry. I'm here to tell you, from firsthand experience, our economy is anything but free. It's not unfettered capitalism at all. It's very highly regulated. The fact is, there are all sorts of rules and policies that drive where the capital goes, how it's deployed, and who gets the returns on that. And the problem that we have is that our economic policies and our regulatory policies have been decoupled from our social goals. We have to fix that. And we can talk a little bit about the kinds of approaches that we need to do. Now, I've got some good news on this, though. The economy isn't static. Just as the job market evolves, the economy doubles. This is US economy, but I'm sure it's the same here. It's an amazing fact most people don't realize. The total gross national product doubles every 40 years, and it's done it reliably for over 200 years. For those of you who know what an exponential curve is, this is an exponential curve. It's done this since the Industrial Revolution. Now, in 1800, in the US, the average household income was $1,000 a year, and that's inflation adjusted. I'm not talking about some weird kind of dollars. Literally, that was the average income in the US. That's about the same as it is today in Malawi and Mozambique. And it's probably not coincidental that the economies of those countries are very similar in structure to the economy of the US around 1800. Yet I really doubt that people in Ben Franklin's time thought of themselves as dirt poor. You know, they were barely scratching out an existence. So what does all this mean? It means that 40 years from now, which you guys will be around to see, and I probably won't. I'm hoping to make it through the week. There will literally be twice as much money, twice as much wealth to go around. So the challenge for us is how do we make sure that new wealth is going to be broadly distributed? When people talk about these issues, they think statically, and they think, well, how are we going to get the money away from these rich people and give it to these poor people? Well, that's part of a potential solution. But the real challenge for us is to implement policies that are going to encourage wealth to be much more broadly distributed. We don't have to steal from the rich and give to the poor. What we need to do is to provide the proper incentives for entrepreneurs and businesses to find better ways to benefit a larger swath of society. So let me wrap things up. I don't want you to think that I'm anti-AI. Nothing could be further from the truth. I think its potential impact on the world is similar to, and I'm not exaggerating about this, similar to the invention of the wheel. But we need to think of it not as some sort of magical discontinuity in the development of intelligent life on Earth, some kind of pixie dust you sprinkle into the computer and it suddenly becomes smart. But you have to think of it as a collection of powerful automation tools that can transform our livelihoods and vastly increase our wealth. So the challenge that we face is that our existing institutions, without some enlightened rethinking, run a serious risk of making a complete mess out of this opportunity. So I'm supremely confident that our future is very bright, that it's more Star Trek than Terminator. But the transition to that world may be brutal and it may be protracted unless we really pay attention to the issues that I've tried to raise today. We really have to find new and better ways to ensure that our economy doesn't just motor on, going faster and faster, while throwing ever more people overboard. Our technology and our economy should serve us, not the other way around. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, let me just start with this, and I'll dive straight in. I've got a 10-year-old daughter. What should I be telling her to look forward to do in her profession?
That's a really good question. This is one-upsmanship. I have 4 daughters. The youngest is 17. She just called before I got here saying, I'm late for school, what should I do? I was like, this is the modern world. I'm 5,000 miles away. And she wants me to do something about this. I'm sorry, I'm going to give a talk, you know. And the oldest is 23. 2 of them just got their first jobs. And the peculiar thing about this is that neither of the jobs that they got existed 10 years ago. Right. One of them is does social media promotion for restaurants in San Francisco. And the other one works at a company called Udacity. It's an online education company. Didn't exist 10 years ago. And they're just right out of college, right out of school.
Are those the sorts of jobs you think they should be getting, though?
I think those are.
They fit into that category of jobs that aren't going to be taken over by computers.
I agree. I do think so. But to answer your question a little bit more directly, you know what they're looking for now at companies like Udacity? They don't expect people to have any experience in what they're doing. They look for a broad liberal arts education. Sorry to tell you that, all you engineers. It's fine to be an engineer. But if I was, what you want to do for a 10-year-old is make sure that they learn good critical thinking skills. And then we have to stop thinking about education as you go along, you get some general education, then you learn a profession, and you're stuck in that profession for the rest of your life. We have to begin to think of education as an ongoing process of retraining. I've got a PhD in artificial intelligence, and I've been arguing at Stanford that we should put expiration dates on those. You know, you get out with your PhD, and in 5 years you don't have one anymore. You got to go back and get retrained. So for me, you know, I've got, as I say, the technical training in artificial intelligence. Before that, I have an undergraduate degree from the University of Chicago in history and philosophy of science. And people often say, well, what was the most valuable part of your education? It was that, because they taught you how to think.
Well, I got a degree in history, medieval history, and I'm a journalist now, and I think computers could probably quite easily do my job, or at least a big part of it. The legal profession is something that you mentioned in your book. It's something I've spoken about as the white collar, that it might be at danger of being taken over by automation. Would you advise anyone to go into a profession as a lawyer now?
No.
Really? As straight as that?
Simple as that. In fact, I had a niece. She's, I'm going to law school. I'm going to be, they're thinking Perry Mason. Is that too old a reference for this?
We get
here's the problem. It's supply and demand. It's economics. The legal profession is in crisis for employment. The Stanford Law School, which is one of the top law schools in the U.S., is desperately trying to figure out what to do because the cost, the price that they charge for a legal degree doesn't pay back. I think only a third of graduates of U.S. law schools get a job within 2 years, I think it is, that require them to pass the bar exam. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to have robots in court going, Your Honor, my client is not guilty. That's not what you're going to have. The thing is, most of what lawyers do is they write simple contracts, they prepare estate plans, they read through what's called discovery. I don't know if that's, prepare for trial. Yeah. And all of those things have been dramatically impacted by automatic processes. The result is you need far fewer lawyers. So at the time, I would not advise anybody. That's like becoming a truck driver. Forget about it. It's not a good profession to go into. And what did Shakespeare say? First, we should kill all the lawyers. Have I got that right?
All right. Let me take a step back. I mean, you say you got a PhD in AI. I wouldn't claim to be any type of authority on AI, but I've done a couple of events now with Steve Ferber. One recently, Christchurch, on the singularity. And we had this big debate on singularity. And I guess you think, and let me just get this right, Ray Kurzweil sets the date for singularity at 2045 and says and I'm reading this out, the non-biological intelligence created in that year will be 1 billion times more powerful than all human intelligence today. You're saying that's nonsense?
Yes. Now Ray's not here to say anything. He's a very persuasive speaker. But the whole superintelligence argument, I'm sorry, I'm an engineer. I come from the bottom up. I ain't seen it. I mean, it's a wonderful theory. We got this great curve and it's going up and it's heading off. Look at the economic curve. It's the same curve. Oh my God. In 2045, we'll all be millionaires. Well, actually that one's true. Well, not 2045. It's in about 100 years. But no, it's complete nonsense. And look, there's this sort of mystical idea that some people have that we're sort of conjuring up the angel or the devil, and that's not what's going on at all. Just look at the facts on the ground. It's like climbing a tree and claiming progress that you're going to the moon. So it's complete nonsense. Now, Ray and others, I'm sorry, this weird fact, they all pick about 2045, and when they correlate around that time with the age of the person, it's just before they were going to die. That's what they find the futurists are always projecting that.
All right, let's talk about, you talk about retraining workers, you talk about inequality, you've said the coming wave of automation raises the specter of a world, in fact you touched on this just now, where the 1%ers have it all and everyone else struggles to survive. These are problems that you are raising. I wonder sometimes, are you raising these with an economist's hat on or with a scientist's hat on? But they're problems nevertheless that you are raising that need to be dealt with by policymakers, right? Do policymakers get this?
Generally, I think the answer is no. The only light on the horizon in this, at least in the U.S., is that both major political parties understand now that income inequality and wealth inequality is a real problem. But how they deal with it and what they think the causes are, that's completely different, unfortunately. But at least it's part of the dialogue now. But you're absolutely right. I was asked, I mean, is it investors? Are they the ones who should solve the problem? No. Is it the engineers? Should they be solving this problem? No. They should do what they're doing, which is great. It's generating wealth. But it is absolutely what you said. It's a policy problem. I'm not a policy expert, but we're not thinking about the policies in the right way.
And okay, so you're not optimistic in any way then?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I
mean, if this is a problem and policymakers are not addressing this problem, they don't even see it maybe.
I do think that's the case. I think that And a lot of it is just how you're framing this problem. You know, the robots are coming, lock the door. Yeah. It doesn't help you to understand what's really going on. Now, you have to talk about the time frames, though. In the short run, it's just like what happened during the Industrial Revolution. Oh, great, now we have machines that can weave. And, you know, the weavers are all starving, and it's the same thing. It's just a modern version of that same process. But after all the weavers grew old and died in poverty, everything was great. You know, we're gonna be there, too. The question is, do we want to change the policies to make a more humane path to a better future?
And you say in your book that we've got about 50 years of pain before things, of this transition, before things get better, unless we address this issue and try and harness the strengths, right? Mm-hmm. So what are we looking at? What do we need to do? And you talk about retraining. Let's talk about that, retraining workers.
Here I've talked about the problems, but I didn't really get into some of the potential solutions. With respect to the retraining problem, there are a couple of policy issues that really need to be addressed. The first is that, at least in the US, the lender of first resort for education is the government. They're the ones who underwrite it. And they're not an economically motivated institution. So they'll give you money to go to school, but they won't tell you what you should go to school and do. And they're not looking at, well, are you going to make money when you get out of school? Will you ever be able to pay that back? So we're not investing in education. We're giving away money to people, and then after they graduate, you're on the hook to pay back that loan, even if you don't have the money. The lenders are thinking about, am I going to get my money back? They're only going to give you money to do things that they believe are going to generate an economic return. And that fixes that whole system. It also gives you a relatively limited risk way of gaining the new skills that you need. I call this in my book a job mortgage, and I do that because most of you probably don't have mortgages if you're students right now, but the mortgages, you may not know, you're not on the hook. All your assets are not on the hook. It's secured solely by the real estate. And here I'm saying it should be solely secured by your future income. So there was actually a big push in the United States to increase home ownership, and these were new financial instruments that were put in place and policies that allowed mortgages, the whole mortgage market, to be created. So we need to do the same thing for education.
Is anyone doing it?
There are a few. Yeah, there are a few. I'm not the only guy talking about this kind of stuff. Interestingly enough, though, they're private parties. And look, if it's a good investment opportunity, the money will come. The problem is, the dumb money is the government.
I guess you need to prove that this works, this job mortgage system. You almost need to put a program in place with a bunch of guinea pigs and show policymakers that this is something that will work.
I think that's true, and it's not at all impossible that there will be pilot programs. Even the government, well, I'm not sure the government is good because they don't have an incentive to make sure that the whole thing pays back. That's part of why the whole mortgage system got messed up in 2008. But it definitely can be done. There are parties trying it. It's an opportunity to invest. And contrary to what I said in my talk, I think this is where the government's got to get out of the way and let things happen. We just don't have the right framework and the right policies. You know, if the government was providing water for 2 cents for free to everybody, they wouldn't be selling bottled water like this, you know, it's the same kind of problem.
I mean, you mentioned the private sector. What about the private sector getting involved and getting behind this? The Bill Gateses of the world, the Gates Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, foundations like that getting behind ideas like this. Is there any scope there? Is there any hope there?
Yes, I think there very definitely is. There are a lot of enlightened rich people, if I can describe them that way, who are very interested in solving these problems. And there are pilot projects. There are things being tried. But as you say, there has to be some proof. You know, if you want to be the first one to do a house mortgage in 1930 and not know whether or not you're ever going to get your money back. Right. So you have to take baby steps and make that happen. But I think again, it's just a policy issue. Do we think that's a good idea? That's just one idea. It's not original to me, really. I mean, Milton Friedman talked about this, you know, about this type of securing education. And I just think we need to move in that direction. I don't think that one's going to be terribly controversial because it's a privatization that hits all the right buttons.
They need to get you to go to Davos and do a talk at the World Economic Forum, where all the
thank you
private
for the
sector
invitation.
guys and the policymakers get together, and I mean that's the sort of refreshing kick that I probably shouldn't say that these meetings often need. And entrepreneurship as well is another way of making this work, right? And that is being pushed on all fronts, of course. And it's something we were talking about last night. But
that's true. But you know, entrepreneurship means a lot of different things to different people.
Yeah.
Right now, you know, you think of the Steve Jobs of the world. You know, you start a company. That's entrepreneurship. But entrepreneurship, you know, the guy who opens a little fruit stand over here on the corner, who thinks, hey, you know, people who walk out of the underground right here, they're going to want to buy that. That's an entrepreneur too. And there's a concept that's there's growing interest in the U.S. called basic income, which serves two fundamental purposes. Basically, it's saying everybody's going to have enough money to eat and to live, and then if you want to do better, you're on your own. There are two views of that. There's what I think has been proved by economists actually to be an incorrect view, and it's widely spread that, well, that's just welfare and people aren't going to want to work. It turns out the exact opposite is true. Once you know that you're not going to starve, now you're willing to take risks, you're willing to become an entrepreneur, you're willing to try stuff out.
You know, I want to go back and talk a little bit more about AI. I mean, I personally find it fascinating. We know your views of singularity, but regulation and ethics are two things that I think it's worth us talking about, because of course that fits in with this economics and this equality argument as well. How far have we got in terms of thinking the right way about regulating this sort of discovery?
Well, the main reason to regulate it is if it's going to cause problems. And we have sort of a whole different talk that I could give for another hour. There are very serious ethical issues that are raised by the types of autonomous systems that we're currently building and its applications in the military. And these are really near-term ethical issues. The autonomous vehicle people that I interact with are really worried about a lot of these issues. You know, you might think, well, it's easy to build a car and it just has to obey the law. But it turns out laws don't really work that way. I'll give you an example. Where I live, speed limit might be 55 miles per hour and the traffic travels at 70. And it would be very dangerous to have a bunch of autonomous vehicles going slower and everybody moving around them just because they're obeying the law. So what should they do? Well, obviously they should go at the flow of traffic. And that's what they do, actually. So, but, you know, what's going to happen when it causes an accident or, well, your autonomous vehicle is speeding. Do you get the ticket? You know, who deals with those kinds of things? And there are very serious ethical issues, like prioritizing in those rare circumstances where the car can and should make a decision about who's going to die, whether it's going to run off a cliff with you in the car to save a school bus full of children, and they really have enough information to be able to adjudicate those things on the fly. These are very serious, and I've been at meetings with philosophers and ethicists and all this, and we're struggling through some kind of framework. I've been arguing at Stanford that probably within about 10 years we're going to have a course sequence in ethical computation, which is how do you take principles of ethics and incorporate them directly into the decision-making systems that will be working in these AI
Just, I don't want to sound like a complete heathen, but autonomous cars aren't driving around the streets right now, are they, in the US?
Oh, yeah, they are.
They are?
Yeah.
It's done? It's integrated?
No, wait. Well, wait a minute. A lot of work on the legal front and the regulatory front has gone on so that to make sure that that can happen, because everybody knows it's a good idea, and it is a good idea, and it's going to save an enormous amount of money and lives, and it's going to transform society. This is a great thing about wealth. I'll state this. We don't probably have time to go into it in any detail, but the estimated savings for autonomous, if we have autonomous cars in the U.S., is $1 to $2 trillion a year. It's 15% of the U.S. GDP. And you can back that up. That's just pulled out of the air. It's incredible. So they're very interested in making this thing happen. Not to mention 30,000 people a year are killed, and these cars make far, far fewer mistakes than human drivers. You can drive up and down the highways where I am, and you'll see autonomous vehicles. There aren't a lot of them, And they're starting with highway driving. Contrary to what you might think, highway driving is simpler to automate than local street driving. But if you're commuting to work, maybe 80% of your time is on the highway. You go up there and you push a button.
I want to thank you for your insight. Great to see you in Davos at the World Economic Forum talking about this stuff, because it brings two very different things together, fascinating things. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
Jerry Kaplan, everyone.
Thank you.